I'd like to call to order the Board of School Commissioners meeting today, June 14th, and I'd like to take the liberty to first order of business. We have our student representative, Isabella LaFemina, and she has to jet off to a senior voice recital this evening, so I would like to thank her for her service on the board the last 2 years as the junior rep and as the senior rep. And to acknowledge all the work that she's done on the board. She has represented herself well with dignity and grace and the student body through the difficult times that the school and the community has been under the last couple of years. And I just wanted to wish you well at St. John University. And turn it over to Mr. Olson.
So I'll say thank you so much as well. It's been great to know you as a student and as a board member. And I have for you this beautiful plaque, outstanding service, and your name tag. Oh. That's fantastic. Don has something better. Okay, so our next order of business, I'd invite all that would like to join in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and please have the secretary note that all commissioners are in attendance, including our lone student rep. So, and next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I would like to request a motion with the addition of an executive session as before the adjournment and after the new business. And also new business C to contain the Allen Street campus water mitigation project contract that was on everyone's desk today and has been discussed in committee. So moved. Okay. Second. Although, yes.
I just had one question. Was the memo that I had sent around going to be added to the agenda, or no, or I am requesting that it be added to the agenda?
The memo?
Yes, I sent around to all the commissioners.
Yeah, no, that was not added to the agenda.
No, I'm asking, can it be added to the agenda?
That would be up to the board. I don't know that there's really any action for the board to take on that.
Well, my question on that would be then, that tells me it's carte blanche for any commissioner to speak to any organization or publicly at any time they choose to. With no...
A motion is, your motion to add that to the agenda?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? So the motion fails.
I think it would be a conflict for a commissioner to vote on that when it is regarding her.
Then it would be a conflict for another commissioner to make a motion. It's, you know, you're acting in a capacity, and the motion has failed, so...
I think the conflict policy is quite clear. If it involves
Karen,
you
we're
or
not
your
discussing it.
family...
You wanted it on the agenda, and
Okay.
it was voted down. So if we can move on with the official business of the board, we have a lot to conduct. So then the motion on the floor is to approve the agenda with the addition of an executive session between 8 and 9 and the addition of Allen Street campus water mitigation on 8C. So any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. So next on the agenda is the consent agenda, which has the previous meeting minutes, the meeting and the committees. It has personnel memo 632 and the addendum, the IDAB, and pre-K grants, and Second readings of the policies listed, a lease to purchase financing for school buses, food service renewal contract, engaging Patel for kids, and a recommendation for a van purchase. So that is what is contained on the consent agenda. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, and did anyone sign up for public input? No. No, okay, so we have no one that signed up for public input. The next item on the agenda for communication is the letter of appointment from the mayor. So after our last full board meeting, Brittany Kavakis resigned from her post. I got it. So in communications, we received a letter from Mayor Allaire, and it's simply pursuant to Rutland City Charter, Chapter 30-2 vacancy. Due to the resignation of Brittany Kavakis, I nominate Peter Fagan to fill the vacancy, and signed by Mayor David Allaire. And we will discuss next steps as we had officially received the letter under new business. And that is it for communication. All right, so next up is school program updates, and I will turn it over to Juan Salamano. She's covering it all.
I'll start with Isabella's report. RIS character trait for June is citizenship and being a positive community member, showing what it means to be RIS. We are happy to report that Mika Goldberg and Kiara Fitzgerald, both third grade students, won a spot on the 2022 fire safety calendar for their drawings on fire safety. RIS enjoyed a fun-filled field day thanks to our PE teachers Nicole Adams and Kate LaBelle, along with PBIS members and parent volunteers. A special thank you to the Rutland City Fire Department for cooling everyone off at the end of the day. We enjoyed a successful step-up day that brought excitement about next year. A very special thank you for the 13 members of the RIS learning community who are retiring at the end of this school year. We wish all of them happiness as they enter this new chapter of their lives, and we thank them for their service to the children of Rutland City. Northwest and Northeast enjoyed fun-filled field days with lots of support from many of our RHS Yes Plan students. Much thanks to our PE teacher Brian Coopely for organizing this event. RIS, Northeast, and Northwest joined forces for another great event this past weekend, the Color Run. This turned out to be a great community event, and it acted as a fundraiser for our parent-teacher groups at each respective school. Thank you to RIS teacher Summer Stutz for organizing this event and for including all of our schools. As the year winds down, Northwest and Northeast enjoyed amazing Cliff finals. Northwest had the Taiko drummers and an in-person visit from author and illustrator Ashley Wolf. Northeast was visited by author Christy Mahaly. We are extremely grateful for the Cliff opportunity this year that supported Cliff's mission of opening up the hearts and minds of our students through the gift of literacy. And then at RMS, we are so proud to announce that we had a tremendous turnout for our first RMS community kickball game. We had over 80 people attend. Many families jumped in to support the event by donating items, collecting donated items, and staffing the grill. While it did not end the way we had hoped, we cannot emphasize enough how proud we are of our RMS community. We held our first dance in over 2 years last Friday. It was well attended and a ton of fun. 7th and 8th grade classes each celebrated the end of the year with pool days at White's Pool. The support of the Rutland Rec was amazing and much appreciated. 6th grade students joined us for Step-Up Day today. They enjoyed a barbecue, a dunk tank, question and answer sessions, and tours of the school provided by the 7th graders. RHS wrapped up the school year with the final exams at the end of May. We then moved into our annual Yes Plan. We are pleased to offer our annual year-end program of intensive courses. The topics this year included volunteerism, fly fishing, and day hikes. Seniors enjoyed a day at Killington Adventure Park today. Thank you to the school board for your ongoing financial support of that event. This week, we will host the awards night and the big event on Thursday at Spartan Arena. All board members are invited and encouraged to come. That concludes my report. Great, thank you.
the new student rep here?
Greg is here.
Okay, so next on our agenda is to welcome a new student representative, and turn that over to Mr. Schillinger. And I don't know if they're here. Oh, perfect. Like we got someone moving out there.
I said to Holden on the way up, you don't even have to sit down, I promise to be brief. So I'm pleased to introduce the board to Holden Champagne. And I told him he didn't have to say anything either, just. I'm pleased to introduce you all to Holden Champagne. Holden is a rising junior this year. He was appointed by his peers to serve in this capacity. Holden is an outstanding student and an accomplished musician and a member of our jazz ensemble at school. When I talked to Holden prior to the election about his interest in serving in this capacity, he talked about the importance of the student voice in making decisions that affect the entire school district, which I thought was spot on. So, members of the school board, Holden Champagne, welcome.
Okay, thank you and welcome. All right, so next up we have the Rutland Ishidoria Student Exchange. Mr. Bliss and Ms. Marsh. That is you.
Good evening. Thanks so much for giving us a few minutes to talk to you about the Rutland Ishidoria Student Exchange or RISE program. We just want to give you an update because due to the pandemic, there hasn't been a lot of action. We want the people on this board and the community to know that the program hasn't gone away. It's still thriving in a lot of ways. In your packet, there's a brief history. If you're interested, you can read that. But just for your information, RISE, this program, is 35 years old. And Megan and I have both been chaperones to take groups of students to Hanamaki to meet new friends and experience the culture in Japan, and also to host people here. And I know there are board members who have had family members or have participated in this before, so you understand the value of it. So we just want to talk a little bit about what's going on, and I would say, if you want to know more about the history, you can talk to anybody who's ever been involved in the program. We still have great friends there in Hanamaki, and I'm thankful for my relationships with them. RISE it's not a budgeted program. It is sustained on the back of fundraising and foundations. Each year we receive a small bit of money from the city. The Tuttle Foundation, through the Vermont Community Foundation, offers us some money. And there are a couple of other large foundations that give us some money to support them. Students who are going on a RISE trip to Hanamaki, they generally write letters asking for financial support or conduct fundraising to make sure things are going. To travel and to host, it can cost somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. So it's one of the great things about the program is that as a student, you actually earn your trip. And I want to let Megan talk a little bit about recent events and what's going on with our current delegation.
So we have a delegation that is anxiously awaiting their trip. Their initial trip was canceled due to COVID, and they have just been on standby. We had the chance to attend one of their recent meetings, and all of the students are still very anxious to attend. We were a little worried that maybe, after 2 years have gone by, interest may have dwindled, but they are pumped and ready to go. So we are waiting for Japan to determine who they're going to let into the country and when. We're waiting on their COVID guidelines to ease up before we are allowed to enter the country. So the students are prepped and ready. We have a chaperone prepped and ready. So we have several different options, plan A, plan B, plan C, for how we can try to get to these students who have been so gracious in their waiting over to experience what 35 years of students before them have. And in the meantime, I'm really excited to announce that we have started a pen pal program with the same sister city in Ishidoria. So we have 12 7th and 8th graders who have been assigned pen pals, and they have exchanged. We just received, before I left school, their second letter. So we have a translator. Well, the Hanamaki has a translator who does all of the heavy lifting for us. So I send all of our students' letters over to him. He translates and passes them on, and vice versa. So our students are getting an amazing opportunity to interact with students when they can't travel. So they're talking a lot about their families, what food they like, what food they hate, what they think the other country's food is all about. a lot of talk about anime and what books they're reading. So it's been really interesting. I get to kind of peruse over them before I hand them out. And on top of just being a great cultural experience, there's a ton of learning that they're getting to do through these letters.
And then just a couple other quick things. As I said, the program's been in existence, the sister city relationship in existence for 35 years. 5 years ago, Hanamaki sent 30 delegates to Rutland to celebrate the 30th anniversary. And it's generally our turn to reciprocate. And we've been on hold for a year. There was supposed to be a 35th celebration in Hanamaki last fall. The target date is for, I think it's October. I have to remember because I have a wedding to go to on the 15th, so it's the weekend before. The weekend before that, I will be hoping to go to Hanamaki. Since Japan isn't currently letting tourism in, we have set a drop-dead date for August 1st, that if we don't have permission to attend for August 1st, we'll have to push that back another year. I've volunteered to go along, Megan volunteered to go along, because we really value the friendship and the relationship. And
I'll volunteer to go along. I'm there. That's my place.
And then, so I want to let you know about that. That would be the next big event if it occurs. And the future of RISE for us is looking strong. We've developed a steering committee, Megan, myself, Anna Taddeo, who sits on the Board of Aldermen, and then Brent Barnett, who is our band director at the high school, and Brent was also a chaperone at one point. So we have people who have a vested interest in the program and in keeping the cultural relationship. And what you'll see as soon as we can is a re-up of yearly delegations going to Hanamaki and then hosting. And we just wonder if there's any questions.
Karen? Yes, how many students go at one time?
It's usually 5 or 6. They stay with host families, and that's one of the best parts of it. You really get to know some people and live with them. So there's only so many host families that may step up on an annual basis, but 5 or 6 kids.
Okay. And is the city sending any delegation? Or is that at the same time or different time?
Anniversary. We're hoping we can get some municipal dignitaries to attend as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you both so much. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have the Equity Committee update. I'll turn it over to Ms. Reed.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to talk with you tonight about the Equity Work Group. It's a district-wide committee. I'm joined by Katie Gino. Katie is a social studies teacher at the middle school, and she was part of the Equity Group since the beginning. So you might remember that we joined and band together in the fall of 2020, so this is our second year that we've been working. The district committee is made up of staff from all different buildings, as well as board representation. And last year we had a really good group of students that participated and offered their insight and perspective. This year that interest has waned, and so a goal for us moving forward is to get back in and have that student voice as part of our group. But we'll talk more about our goals and hold on to the presentation. So the first piece that I'm going to refer you to in your packet is the district's 4-year plan. From a previous presentation. That provides a general idea of our work over a 4-year period of time, starting with last year, which was, of course, our first year. Here on Google right now, you click on one of those highlighted areas, and it would take you to the plan that we're currently working on. So we're going to move from that. I just want to show you kind of like the general plan. Onto the page that says RCPS Workgroup Year-End Wrap-Up Plan. It's the 3-column form. You'll notice on that form, this is kind of an update on where we have set this year. In the left-hand column, you're going to find tasks that we completed that were in our our year 2 plan. Then ones that we started, made progress with, but still need to continue next year. And then the last column are priorities for next year, which weaves into our year 3 plan, which is your last handout. You'll notice that as you look at our year-end wrap-up and the both the activities that we have completed or have in progress or priority, that we consider, our group considers all marginalized populations and all students. Katie has some specific examples and some things that have been happening in our schools that help to kind of highlight some of the work that we've done.
Okay, so I'm going to try to highlight one or two things from each building, otherwise we will be here all night with the wonderful things that are being done around the district. RAS, the library, has created some displays in the library, in the hallways, highlighting voices that have historically been marginalized. They also make it a point in their text selections to include authors and storylines that represent the diversity of our student body. Allen Street, they reassigned 3 gender-neutral bathrooms. Their daily social-emotional circles focus on eliminating the stigma associated with marginalized groups. And the students selected a mural representing the multifaceted roles of women in history. At Northeast, I know the CLIF activities was mentioned earlier. The Children's Literacy Foundation grant-sponsored multiple literacy events with a focus on an effort to protect the use of children's literature and reading, to learn about a broad range of cultures and rich traditions from around the world. And there were many books, but one was a book by Michael Cadu celebrating Native American culture, specifically Abenaki culture through the art of storytelling and song. Kids were able to get 10 free books from this program, and they are a multicultural mix of amazing authors and topics. At Northwest, staff have been working on equity and inclusion and representation for a number of years and have made curriculum impacts that have led to cultural changes for our school. This year, they've been focusing on authentic education regarding the Abenaki community, and both Northeast and Northwest shared a grant to bring students to an Abenaki immersion program. Our IS has been focused on food insecurity, which can affect many of our families. They've established a food pantry for all families and students to access, and that's in partnership with the Vermont Food Bank. They are able to continue this through grants throughout the summer and are bringing food to community locations because they don't want transportation to be an additional barrier for families. At RMS, in the package you'll see, we included the standards for equitable and inclusive behaviors that was developed in the fall. We had our 3rd annual Black History Month celebration, and it was planned and presented by students, particularly students of color taking the lead. And we instituted this year a new Pride Plus Club to offer a place for our LGBTQ plus students to feel comfortable and celebrate.
So we hope that those examples kind of highlight the diverse experiences that we have to demonstrate the equity lens that we're all looking at. Teachers, staff, administrators, as we plan activities and lessons for our students. So areas of focus, you have in your packets the Year 3 Equity and Year 3. It gives you, when you put that highlighted one on that first page, bring you to this page, and it gives you more specific information about our goals for the next year. We plan to expand our community-based learning opportunities. We want to continue our work with restorative practices. We want to continue to work on creating an accessible environment for all children and their families. We're going to work on meeting more basic needs of our children. We're going to work on looking at our policy and reviewing policies and procedures within the district. We'll also gather and create materials and resources, especially around curriculum, and offer professional development. And some of the topics that we've talked about are implicit bias and microaggression. And we'll continue to update the board accordingly. So at this point, if you have any questions or comments about what we've shared, welcome them.
Did I miss what you were doing at RHS?
I started with that one, yes.
Oh, okay.
The library has been focusing on highlighting text of groups who have been historically marginalized.
Okay, thank you.
So if you
Created displays, so outside of the library as well as inside the library.
Oh, I put that as RIS, sorry.
Well done, nice stuff. Under policy and procedure review, I feel maybe silly asking, but what's HHB investigations?
Hazing, harassment.
Thank you. I knew I'd feel silly when you said it, but okay, thank you. I was like, couldn't get it.
Cool. Thank you very much for all your work.
COVID brain.
Next up on the agenda, we have our audit update.
Here, just to give you a brief update on the timing and the plans for our annual audit. There's basically no change in direction or approach from what we have described in the we're going to solicit bids from 10 CPA firms that have excellent reputations for work in the nonprofit and school district space. We are about a month or a month and a half behind our original timing. We had originally planned to send out the request for proposals in May. They're going to go out later this week. We've run into a couple of delays with some of our work activities, but we are just about wrapped up with the financials. We have a few minor adjusting entries to make for things like equipment and some accrued liabilities for sick days and vacations. So we're down to the short strokes. And then we expect the audit field work itself to run through basically mid-July through mid-September, so about a 60-day window for the field work. I think I've mentioned before, but the audited financials are due to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse by September 30. So this audit work will be front and center as one of our top priorities, of course, during these summer months. I might also mention that since the last audit, we have followed up on a couple of the key recommendations that Brian and Charlotte had made to us, which was to make improvements in segregation of duties and some selected activities, as well as in the timeliness of when we complete banking and cash reconciliation. So hopefully, when the new auditors come in, they will be able to make an assessment unless if they think we've made adequate progress in those areas. If not, then we'll take that up. So with that, let me just ask if you have any questions. Okay, I closed it.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ted. All right, next up, Mr. Bliss will be back with Ms. Brodowski and give us a recovery update.
My name is Abby Brodowski. I'm the Rutland City Public Schools Recovery Coordinator. And tonight's presentation is an update on ESSER with the goal of bringing the board members and the community up to date on where we are. So one thing I like to remind people early into recovery is that the mission of Rutland City Public Schools is actually inextricably linked to the pillars of recovery. So when we talk about delivering a comprehensive and engaging curriculum for our students, that's academic achievement. When we are providing safe and healthy environments for students, that's safe and healthy schools. And addressing the social and emotional needs of students is social emotional learning, engagement, and truancy. So these things that we do for recovery are very much the foundation of what we do as a school system in general. And it's really important that we recognize that. I did include on your packets, there's a little link. It's a little hard to see on the TV, but there is a link. And for new board members, I put our ARP ESSER plan in front of you. So that's our third round of funding plan. ESSER 2 doesn't have a very detailed plan like that. There's also a video that explains that whole thing. And if you ever want to call me and ask questions, you can, but that's all there for us. So in terms of some updates, this past April, I put together a little mini retreat with the recovery team, which is made up of the Longfellow administrators of the district. And we reviewed both ESSER 2 and ARC ESSER to determine which projects are happening and which are maybe less likely. Because in recovery, we have evolving needs with the district, and we're able to change our plans as we move forward to meet the needs. We identified district leaders as point people for each of the ARC ESSER items and then determined timelines. We have some projects that are front burner projects that need to happen in the next 6 months, and we have mid burner and back burner projects. ESSER 2 needs to be spent by September 30th, 2023, and ARP ESSER, we have an extra year. So we wanted to make sure we could prioritize and have a good timeline for people and people who are actually working on this stuff. So ESSER 2 is just over $5 million, and at this point it is fully budgeted and due to be expended by September 30th, 2023. This presentation has some rounded figures, but all of the investments that we are making are within the role of the grant, so we can't use ESSER for just anything. And especially as we get into ARP ESSER, there's some pretty significant constraints on how we use the money. For ESSER 2, we're using about $2.9 million toward personnel. So that's salaries, benefits, and supports. And $2.4 million of that is going toward instruction. So we are working to serve the changing student needs that we are seeing. This is instructional personnel, interventionists, tutoring, stipends, instructional programming, professional development. We also have an additional $430,000 going toward counseling. We weren't able to staff as many counselors as we had hoped, but we are able to do some of that work. We also have about $1.5 million toward construction. You have heard of our carpet removal projects. We also are doing an asbestos removal project, air quality study that is actually happening right now as we speak, and architecture and engineering for our outdoor classrooms. And we have about $422,000 toward supplies, that's materials, technology like Chromebooks for students, and PPE. For ARP ESSER, we have turned in our plan to the Agency of Education for approval, and we are going to be making some investments coming up here pretty quickly, and we're on track to do that. For those of you who are new to this, 20% of ARP ESSER has to be spent on student learning loss, with the remaining 80% being spent in other areas, but it all needs to tie to COVID, and there are some restrictions on how we can use the funds. So if you dig into your ARP ESSER plan, I recommend going to page 5, and that will list all of the things we're hoping to spend money on, and that can evolve and change as our needs change. So we have a few strategies that are helpful to be aware of that were communicated to the administrative cabinet in May. In terms of hiring for the district, our primary goal is to become fully staffed at all schools as planned, and then once we're fully staffed, hire the grant funded positions. So it's important to us that we have our permanent positions staffed. For summer programming, ARP ESSER funds can only be used for summer programming that is free. So we need to be very careful not to use that programming for example, for cabinetry, we'll be getting child care subsidies. So we have to make sure we're careful about how we use that, and that may change over time. For professional development and school improvement, district and building administrators are able to submit proposals that align with their current plans, and many have done so. And we have a process to approve those and help them use our ESSER funding that's aligned with their plans. For school structures, and in this sense we mean learning structures, students or schools are working to ensure that the learning structures meet current changing needs of all students, including vulnerable populations. We actually often ask ourselves the question, are our structures meeting the current needs of students? And we're adjusting when we need to. Construction projects are prioritized to ensure investment in areas of the greatest need, and the ones that have lasting gains beyond recovery period, and that's where the taxpayer can see some benefit over time if we're able to really make good investments. And our timing is important strategy because we have one grant that ends a year before the other. So there are some projects that we haven't started on as much because of the timeline. So for this summer, we're looking in our construction realm, we're tackling carpet removal, we're replacing carpets with luxury vinyl tile and some carpet-like flooring that's a little bit better for sound in some of the band and large group construction areas. We have air quality testing, the group is here right now, and for the next 2 days going through the buildings. And then we're working on Allen Street groundwater remediation. This is in flux, and we just found out today, and it's in your board packet. We just added a letter to you. We'll hopefully be able to do that this summer, which is exciting. Fingers crossed. Summer programming, we're doing tutoring and extended instruction, kindergarten through 12th grade.
And for professional development, we've invested heavily in our June and August in-services. We have Marzano, Lucy Calkins for the elementaries. We're doing curriculum work district-wide, and we have the coaches working on that. So really the next step in terms of ESSER, you'll hear from me with all the letters I send you to spend our money, right? Like keep moving these projects forward. But in the fall, anytime we make changes to the ARC plan, we have to go back out and do meaningful engagement. We have to talk to all of our stakeholders, let them know what we're planning on doing and how they feel about it. So you'll hear from me, and I'll ask you to complete a survey in the fall at some point if we make and when we make changes to the plan. So that is where we are right now with ARC ESSER and ESSER 2, and we're looking for questions.
I have one. You mentioned that we're not able to staff as many counselors as hoped. Was that due to financial reasons or lack of applicants?
When this support money hit, every school district across the country started advertising for counselors. Everyone. And so any person that works in the mental health or counseling profession was in demand. And as an example, I think for this current school year, we want to hire 5 counselors on the time to answer the month. So I anticipate once we get fully staffed, we have a couple more spaces to fill here for just full-time staff. We have some applications coming in that I'm hopeful a little bit, but the truth is that is still the biggest profession in demand.
One more follow-up to that. So is there any way that you guys could do any kind of short-term, like a contract until those people turn up to like bridge until, eventually we have people that are committed?
We could, I'll give you an example, we currently do have contracts with Rutland Mental Health to help support our kids. And then in addition to that, you can hire traveling counselors, traveling nurses. There are organizations that farm out related services like occupational therapy, speech language therapy. But the truth is, the last time we went out looking for someone like that, they didn't have the staff either. So it's kind of hard, but that's definitely an option we'll look into if we need to.
Can I do one more follow-up question? So do you have any particular plans of action for like to assist with teachers that maybe are having troubles and of course the lack of staffing to address children that have, unique needs as far as backup plan?
It's a great question. The thing that I can say that would be most helpful about that is, well, that need is important to say that, okay, every school district in the state and across the country has students with specific needs that may require the need to help of a counselor or a case manager. That's true. But I will also say for every school across the country, the most important thing they can do is establish a community that welcomes everybody. If I'm a kid and I'm stressed, troubled, traumatized, nervous, anxious, and I walk into a place that I really don't feel welcome, my reaction to that can come out in any number of ways. So there's actually that kind of two-pronged approach that's really important.
I'm just very impressed with the amount of work that goes into this and the fact that you are just using up every piece the best that you can. It's very confidence building that you are doing everything to the best of your ability to make sure we're using this the best way we can use this. So it's just, I've been in the building committees and the financial committees, and it's just amazing. It's amazing to me how responsible you're being with the money. So I just wanted to say that out loud, that I'm very impressed with.
I have you once say this, and she will pat herself on the back, but have totally with an ability to focus on the deep regulations, wide contracts, and all the learning. Without that, without the work, it would stop so many other things that we do.
There's a lot of knowledge.
I really appreciate you saying that, and I want to make sure that Abby gets the majority of that credit there, and many other people too. But without her steep learning curve, you know, I have to learn about Davis Bacon, legal contracts.
Well done.
But I always have a team of people that I can ask questions to and say, I don't know this. How should we proceed? How do, and we're always going back and forth. It's an iterative process. It's open and communicative, and I think that a lot of trust.
Great, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, next up is central office reports, so I will turn it over to Superintendent Olson.
Thank you, Allison. I wanted to congratulate the class of 2022. They're graduating Thursday, and as everybody knows, if you read the national news and you read about education, this has been a couple of tough years for kids in schools, as I was talking about. So this class has gone through that, they got through that adversity, and they've been very successful. They got to the finish line, so congratulations to them and to their families. Really, I mean, just getting to the finish line in high school is tough over the last few years. They should be commended for that. So congratulations to them, and thank you to the community for the support for those students. I was looking at our yearbook that just came out. Did you get this? I don't know if you've seen it already, Lauren.
Oh, yeah?
You have, yeah. So our yearbook is out, and there are a lot of smiling faces. There's a whole bunch of them right here. So it's good to see that we're kind of getting back to normal a little bit, and spirit is back, and so it's great. Congratulations to those seniors. So speaking of yearbooks, we have copies for you. They're right over here. The old joke that Mary Moran would say is, you can't have them now, you can have them at the end of the class period. But if you can take one home, if you would like to keep it, you can keep it. If you want to look at it and you want to give it back, we'll find a good home for it. If you want it. So there's one for each. Graduation, I think Lauren had already said this, is Thursday, 6 o'clock at the Spartan Arena, and our senior awards night is tomorrow night at the high school, in the high school gym. So graduation Thursday, 6 o'clock in the Spartan Arena. We'd invite you all to attend if you are interested. You don't, not an obligation, but if you're interested, we have the school board members march with the faculty at the beginning as we proceed in. It's a great honor. Great honor. Wear your best. I wanted to thank publicly Mr. Jonathan Reynolds, who's our commencement speaker. John is from the class of, RHS class of 2002. He's the Vice President of Clinical Services at Rutland Regional Medical Center, so it takes a lot of work to speak in front of 2,000, 3,000 people, I think, or so. So we appreciate John being willing to do that. Tomorrow is the last day of school. I was at, a number of us were at Northwest yesterday reading to the kids at Northwest. We all had little places to read, and I got to read to some kindergartners, and I said, how many days, when's the last day of school? They were like, Wednesday, how many days left? Oh, 2. And I said, are you excited for the summer? They were like, yeah, we're excited for the summer. And they told me their plans, and then I said, are you excited school's over? No. I was a pleasant surprise. They were sad to leave their friends and leave.
Tomorrow is also the open house for the Yes Plan at the high school.
Yep, thanks, Karen. Yeah, tomorrow at RHS is the RHS Yes Plan open house. It's 9 to 11, I think?
Yes.
Yep. Right. Okay. So, again, a long year. I think I kind of have to remind myself now, I think we're kind of back to normal. Here we are, generally like we would have pre-pandemic. But think back to the way things were at the beginning in September, the beginning of the school year, or getting into December when we were having the Delta variant, and then the Omicron variant came along. That was a big challenge, and folks were working super, super hard to make sure that our buildings were safe. So I want to thank the students, the families, the staff for sure, the community, and this board for supporting our kids to help us get through that. We were able to keep our buildings open. We were able to keep our buildings safe and healthy, and we were able to keep our kids present in school. That was a great accomplishment, and we've had a successful year. And now we're on to recovery, as we just heard. Just a quick update from, our district has had meetings, community meetings with the Vermont office of the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants. So, as we know, that is happening, and we are expecting Rutland more refugees coming into the community. We just haven't seen as many yet in the schools, so, but we're we're expecting over the next couple of years that there will be. And so we're trying to plan for that, updated on that, and we are looking forward to welcoming those families in to serve them. Hiring update, we mentioned that too. It is a competitive market, and it takes a lot of work to do this. You want to make sure that you're finding the best people. We have administrators, teachers, paras working together to interview and kind of comb through all the different people who are coming into the district. So I think we are down now to maybe I'd say like a handful of professional educator openings and maybe 2 handfuls of para openings. So especially if you're interested as a para in that kind of a position, we and we, of course, I mentioned last month that we have Tapestry and Epic openings. So if you're interested in any of those things, send us an application. But we have hiring that's going to happen over the next few weeks, I'm sure, and we have a summer hiring protocol since we don't have a board meeting coming up soon. Every summer we have this situation. So what we do is we'll inform the board if we make any hires. You'll get an email that will explain it. If you have any kind of significant objection to that hire, when you get that email, you want to contact us. Otherwise, we'll approve that hires in August in our first meeting. Okay. So that is clear. I don't know if you have questions for me, but we also have a motion to implement that protocol.
You have the motion there, so are we ready to go? No questions, I guess?
We'll make a motion and then we can discuss.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the superintendent to notify the board via email of potential hires during the summer months. If there is no significant objection to the recommended candidate, the position will be hired and filled. The board will ratify such actions at the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question. So when it comes to, like, I know, like, at the beginning of each sports season, we approve the decision, the coaching staff. Now, since we won't have a meeting before the coaching staff will be starting for the fall, how does that work?
Those always go out during the
Because I know we have a new varsity coach in the fall, so, like, how does that work?
Yeah. That whole list.
That's part of that list?
That would just come out in the August meeting for the August regular meeting that we have.
Anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
Also, I have a quick question. If we're going to graduation, is there a specific time and place that you recommend that we go in order to...
Avoid traffic?
Well, that's one thing, but I'm familiar with that crazy parking lot, but...
We have an email from Rebecca.
Oh.
To her. She'll lead us through everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend going, if you get there later than 5:30, it's hard to get in. It's not hard, it's just hard to get in through the traffic. So, yeah, you just let someone know at the door. We have tickets, but you can let someone know at the door. And then we'd love for you to sit with us. So you get a nice seat, good view.
Okay. So next up is our committee reports. We'll start out with the building committee, so I will turn it over to Kevin.
Okay. We had a building committee a week ago. Building committee meeting a week ago. Let's see. Regarding the several projects going on at Alley Street, the replacement of the windows will be started by the Royal Group. They should be starting in late July. The groundwater remediation, I get these mixed up. Is the groundwater remediation thing the one that's starting sooner rather than later? Or is that the culvert?
But not the culvert.
Not the culvert, okay. So we had 2 different bids, and it turns out we can do that sooner rather than later. It sounded like the first we weren't going to be able to do it till next year, but it is going to be able to be done this summer, correct?
Another new business.
Yeah, that's a new thing, okay.
And the COVID update won't happen until next summer, and that's a city thing. That's not our project, but it's abutting our property at Allen Street. The following projects will be starting, there's some parts of the intermediate school that will be starting the end of this month. The high school work will be starting July 5th. There's also asbestos removal project that will probably happen next summer. We're still doing back and forth about getting all the permissions and lining up folks for that. Somebody mentioned earlier that the HVAC and air quality project inspections have begun. They're today through Thursday. And the, let's see, the Green Schools Initiative Stormwater Project, we're still in the designing phase, so we'll know more about that later. There's also PCV testing, schedules back here. That's starting this summer in July at Northeast, and then the middle school will be happening, the testing will be in October or December of this fall, and then other things will be happening in 2023 and 24. So that's a kind of a spread out project. And we also made arrangements to purchase a van, which we passed on the consent agenda, right? I think that's all I had.
Anyone else from building, anything to add or questions? Okay, great, so next up is the policy committee, so I turn it over to Kathy.
Okay, so in the policy committee, we went over two policies. One, no changes are recommended, and then 5120, we changed the pronoun to, instead of his or her, we changed it to the superintendent. So I'll make a motion to accept both of those policies for first reading.
Second.
Any questions?
All those in favor of the first reading? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. That's it? Okay, perfect. So next up is finance and planning, so I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thank you. We had a meeting last Tuesday, and we were very busy. So busy that I would love for Ted to give a report if possible.
I would love to do that.
My excuse is that I was on Zoom with COVID, so I was, not paying all that much attention. I'm totally paying attention.
And hopefully you're feeling much better.
100%, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Ted. Thanks, yeah.
We had a very productive meeting of the Finance and Planning Committee last Tuesday. As most of you know, since we were extremely fortunate to have most of you join us, and I thank everyone for those who were able to make the extra time in addition to the committee members. So I'll touch just lightly on a couple of the key points that we covered, and then if there are any questions or comments, we can follow up. You might recall that the first topic was the matter of engaging Hotel for Kids in order to assist the district in conducting its strategic planning process. We went over the scope of work, the recommendation from administration. We talked about the TEL's capabilities and demonstrated work, including with school systems in Vermont. And hopefully made the case that the proposed fee is very reasonable given the scope of work and the number of hours. We also added the fact that we've gotten indications that the service fee for the strategic planning exercise is likely to be reimbursable via ESSER grant funding. So we will be pursuing that with dispatch. And thank you very much, Sarah, for making the comments that you did earlier about the work that family has done, because it is truly outstanding, and this is part of the work that she helps me with and many others. The second topic is we reviewed the administration's proposal to renew the food service contract with Fresh Fix Cafe for an additional year. We have a multi-year contract with Fresh Picks that has annual renewal provisions and repricing windows. This will be the third of 4 possible renewals under the multi-year contract. A key theme is that the district overall is satisfied with the quality of the food service delivery and the responsiveness of Fresh Picks Cafe management. Occasional issues arise, and occasional issues do arise. We tend to hear about the exceptions and the things that don't occur as we move them to, such as occasionally a student may say, I didn't get enough food, or I didn't have the right selection. And those things, especially in an environment with supply chain disruptions and other disruptions, likely going to happen. But the thing that we can control best is working closely with Fresh Picks to follow up on root causes and get those things rectified. And I know that Rob Bliss has been on top of many of those issues if and when they arise, but he concurs with this assessment. And so given our satisfaction with the meal service performance, we recommended to award the maximum percentage increase allowable by the state of Vermont for the coming year, which is 6.8% increase in the cost charged for each student meal. And of course, 6.8% is considerably above the 3.7% that applied last year because inflation is higher. I pointed out for the committee that while that is high, we are hopeful that it will be in fact satisfactory to cover their costs. Because if you had an opportunity to look at the very recent May CPI report, which just came out within the last couple of days, food away from home, which is what this food service is, was measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics as increasing by 7.4% in the 12 months that ended in May of this year. And just as an indicator of some of the categories, poultry, meat, fish, eggs, those rose by over 1% just in the month of May. Eggs rose by 5% just in the month of May. So, we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue to work with Fresh Picks to make sure that they're compensated adequately and that they can provide the food that our students need. And we'll be working closely with them. We also provided the committee with an update on the administration's initiative to lease to own the 4 new school buses. The committee agreed with a recommendation for the board to pass a resolution that gives me, as the chief financial officer, authority to finalize the transaction by signing several documents on behalf of the district. This is a one-time authorization for this particular transaction, and so as you know, that was approved in the consent agendas, and we thank you for that. Just because I like to follow what's going on in some of these markets, I just ran a check before I came into tonight's meeting. So today, the interest rate on the U.S. Treasury note, the 5-year note, closed at a yield of 3.56%. That's up more than 1% just since April 1. And all of you know what the rates are going in terms of the trend. So I'm very thankful that the district was able to lock in a very favorable and low rate, because probably you're going to hear tomorrow afternoon when the Federal Reserve concludes its meeting this week that they're going to raise interest rates another 75 basis points. That's at least what the market is pricing in. So thank you again for the opportunity to lock in the financing for those 4 buses, which, by the way, will get better gas mileage, and that will help too. Finally, the committee decided that we do not need to hold a meeting in the month of July. Thank you for the room. And I guess that was about what we covered.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a nice month of July.
Any questions or recommendations from the committee? Okay, so I will turn it over to Stephanie for Staff Relations Committee report.
Thanks, Allison. So we had a Staff Relations Committee meeting. We have 2 new members, 2 new commissioners on that committee, so I thought it would be a good time just to have a
non-negotiation meeting to let the new members and other board members who were present kind of know the processes of negotiations and kind of just some things from the last negotiation process. We just started talking about some stuff that we can do to continue building as a board to do some more rapport with the administration and staff. And that was it. And we have one more meeting this month in June, and then we'll probably take some time off and meet again in August. So that's that.
Questions or additions from anybody? Great. All right, so that finishes up our committee reports. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business, which we do not have. Karen?
I would just, at the April 12th meeting, we had discussed the superintendent's prior evaluation and the criteria for the evaluation, and we were supposed to be provided with copies of both of that, and I've not received them.
I don't know if you have met yet.
We were planning,
There's a meeting scheduled, then you were
Yes.
sick, and then I don't know if anything got rescheduled.
we did meet. But I dropped the ball then, because I didn't realize we were supposed to send that out to everybody.
Yeah, it's not just you.
I didn't realize we were supposed
Yeah.
to send that out to everybody, so we'll rectify that.
Thank you. We could receive that. And also at that April 12th meeting, we had discussions about started with discussions about the middle school and some of the behaviors that were going on there, and we had requested to receive a report as to disciplinary records or a lump sum or a summary of the discipline throughout for all the schools, and we haven't received that yet.
I think you asked for that. You asked for that, and I think when we were talking about how we would try to produce that, I think we gathered that data. We actually gather that data every year anyway. I think that probably the best format for doing that for this board would be to look at it as we go through the strategic planning process. It's going to start in September, so that you can see, this is what we're seeing as far as behaviors. This is how we're responding to them. Every school does some kind of analysis every year.
Could we get last year's? I mean, I understand getting the update in September,
Yeah,
but...
I can give some, like a sample.
We've had presentations to the
Yeah.
board previously
Yeah.
too, so.
Did we do that at the beginning of the year last year?
I don't remember
Yeah.
the timing, but
Yeah.
I think that might be an avenue to pull a summary from last year.
Yeah. So I have samples if you'd like to see something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So then we are on to new business, and just wanted to update the board on the summer meeting schedule and the retreat planning. So the board and committees plan to not meet in July. That gives our administrative team a little break, as well as not as many moving pieces and actions that we need to act on as a board. The retreat planning, the topic that we wanted for that is going to be under the strategic planning. So rather than happening in August, as we have sometimes done in the past, that timing probably is going to align more with September, October, fall time for when we just engaged Battelle, and then it'll follow in their timeline. And so that date will be to be determined. At the bottom of the list is the upcoming meetings. We still have some committee meetings this month, and then in August, we will pick up the full board ad hoc committee meeting on the mascot will be the 23rd at 4:30 as noted there. And then the full board meeting for August will be the Tuesday of the month, the 30th, and that is the evening before school opening. So that is the dates to come.
May I just ask a question on that?
Yes.
Why is the meeting moved to the day before the school openings?
Usually that's when it is, but usually that's the fourth Tuesday. It's just the way that the month falls, that didn't realize, saying that it was going to be the 23rd, that
No, I'm just saying, why is it moved from like Tuesday, the earlier Tuesday in the month to the last Thursday, last
to align with
Tuesday?
the opening of school.
But what is the purpose of that? That's my question.
So I think what we're waiting for on that, Karen, is as we're going through possibly the hiring process, and also so that we have time to, we have a retreat, our administrators meet in the middle of the month, and any of that information that's going to come to you has to be put together.
Okay.
It makes more sense to do it at the end of the month than at the beginning, where we haven't gone through any of that planning process that's going to happen in the middle of the month. So,
Yeah, I was just wondering if, because I don't think we had an involvement in actual schools opening, so I didn't know why it was changed.
Just more for update. And again, this goes back to when we used to meet twice a month. We would skip the first meeting in August.
Okay.
And it would only be, so.
Thank you.
Have a hold up from that.
Sort of related information, we were trying to figure out a date for the buildings committee, and was there any problem with the 16th?
I'm not available the 16th.
Oh, okay.
But,
All right.
and some admin, I think there was a question on your retreat dates, right? Or was that when we were looking at the 9th? I don't remember.
we're the 9th and the 10th.
But as far as your committee, if your committee members can commit and your admin, then
It's nice to have all of us in the same room to schedule it.
Yeah.
I should have done this at the end of the last meeting, sorry about that.
no worries.
I have a question. Can I get some clarification just on the retreat?
Yep.
So are we not doing a retreat? Or you're saying you're doing it in the fall in conjunction with strategic planning?
The topic is strategic planning, so that will be what is being discussed. So we want to do that with our team our consultant that we've hired to do the strategic planning.
They will be doing our retreat with us?
Yes.
Their schedules, they're scheduling starting September, I think. Is that right, Ted? So I figured that would make more sense to do it.
Okay. Then the next, yeah, sorry.
Our meeting last month, when we were kind of going back and forth in regards to the motion, and when I finally did the motion that I put out there in creating a committee, I don't believe one meeting is going to justify, and I mean, most of our meetings are an hour, and I don't think one meeting, and I really don't think waiting until August is appropriate time to, kind of just like other committee meetings, it needs to happen sooner rather than later. Waiting till the end of August is, I don't think, appropriate.
So the reason why we waited until August was the concerns voiced then was it was too soon to talk about it, and we didn't want to talk about it in May or June. So it doesn't seem.
No, we didn't want to talk about it at that particular meeting.
And then the other concern was waiting the legislation. The legislation has passed, but part of the legislation is a policy, and that policy that governs what the legislation means and what you need to do will not be available till the 1st of August. So to have all those factors in place, we're looking at August. Otherwise, we would just be rehashing like we have for 2 years. So the timing to have all the pieces in place that people asked for would be in August.
So is this meeting going to last more, are we going to have a time frame on it for 1 hour? Because I don't think that's appropriate either. I mean, the purpose of that, part of going with the ad hoc committee meetings is talking about the education pieces, putting all of our ideas together, not necessarily rehashing, coming up with the stuff that's been talked about for the last 2 years that nothing's been implemented. Having conversation about that 1 hour is not enough time, especially being new board meetings, or new board members.
I mean, it is the individual topic, and it is a meeting that's happening at 4:30, so I mean, I think...
Is there going to be a set time limit?
I mean, I don't formally think there will be, but certainly it's not something I think that needs to drag on for hours. I don't think that...
I understand that.
...be productive.
And it may not be, so with that being said, we may not have an action item on our August meeting if we don't resolve and have enough conversation in that one meeting.
That depends on the will of the board.
Of the board, not just one person.
As always, yes.
No, I wouldn't go that far, but okay.
Nothing can pass the board without board's consent, which requires a majority vote, no matter what one person's opinion is.
we are a board, and the only way we can move forward is by majority vote.
I understand that, and this particular topic, we need to actually work together as a board and not have the division, which is already still within the newest board there. Thank you.
Well, I would agree with Stephanie, and in fact, I did send you an email regarding this. I would agree that I don't feel that putting off the meeting that late, we'll have the policy or the recommendations August 1st, so I'm not sure why we couldn't set a meeting earlier in August, and I would agree that we probably will need more than one meeting. I think there are a number of solutions that can be raised that need to be thoroughly discussed, so that maybe we could come to some sort of consensus.
I would suggest that we have the meeting and see where it goes from there. I feel like we're arguing about a scheduled meeting and what is going to come out of that meeting, whereas I think that having the meeting and the board discussing and deciding how we move forward as a board is going to be more productive than back and forth now over discussing how the meeting is scheduled.
But I think then that bears the question, is this going to appear on the September agenda?
Again, it depends on the board and the outcome of that meeting.
Well, at the last, apparently, why it was put on was you said you had a majority of members of the school board that voted to put it on the agenda for that day. And I know a couple of other members were not contacted, so I'm not sure how there ended up being a majority, but I feel like at least we should be notified of that. We are a board that is supposed to be working together, and this kind of stuff does not make a smooth transition for people or a willingness to work together.
I think that's the point of the meeting, and I think instead of arguing continually of what's going to happen at the meeting and after the meeting, we need to hold the meeting and discuss the topic as a board. I think it's counterproductive now to predetermine the outcome of the meeting that we are holding so that we can discuss the topic. Charlene? This might be a little off topic, but this is for my clarification. So in the past, I guess my understanding of the retreats was more for board development, and I feel like, I don't know, it sounds to me like we're using the retreat now to work on, like we have a committee, a strategic planning committee, and we're working on something to do with that. I'm just curious, are we going to have any kind of board development retreat type of thing? Normally that's, or I shouldn't say normally, because nothing's normal anymore, but I was under the impression that the retreat was for helping the board develop. And it doesn't sound like we're doing that. It should be for the board goals and development, and one of our goals is through strategic planning, to set our goals and to align the district. And the board has a performance excellence initiative that all started with a board retreat. So this is not anything different than that. And as far as board development, if people are looking for individual development, the VSBA has many webinars about your role as board member and how to act with a board and what is the purview of the board. And that's kind of what we covered on our retreats last year, was that sort of topic. So getting back into the higher level work of the board with the strategic planning. Yes.
I think, I'm sure you know this because you've probably been involved in strategic planning before, but I think it's, yes, we have the Finance and Strategic Planning Committee, and there, I think our role is to guide the process and come up with the South for Kids and then bring it here, and then, but correct me if I'm wrong, Bill or Allison or anybody else here, but this is the retreat that is the actual process of bringing together stakeholders to share in the process, and that can be developing. That can be a developmental activity in my past experiences, that you are pulled together with people and you collaborate and you brainstorm and you're throwing ideas around how to better the district and better the schools. And I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, but lately, the Finance and Strategic Planning Committee has been the whole board, basically, except you were not there this last time, but the whole board's there. So we're all talking anyway. regardless, I didn't even I should have done that. Somebody else, just cut that part out. You know, the whole board, you know, has been involved with that, but, you know, I think it's not that we need individual discussion about how, you know, what the board role is, but I think in general, this board could use some development as a whole, in its entirety together. That's all.
I think I do understand what you're saying, and I do agree. I do think also that will come a bit organically through us hashing out and talking about what we think is really good to put in that plan. I think it's really a great part of that process. It's that nerdy part of me that's like, sort of like that kumbaya stuff that comes out along with strategic planning, I guess. I don't know.
So when so once we get a little bit more on board with Patel, we'll get that date?
Yes.
Is it going to be, do we have an idea if it's going to be a whole day thing or a few hour thing, or we'll get that information later down the line?
I think it's a few hours, because most of those things were broken down. Most were like 3-hour increments, I think, for any of the engagement activities, so I presume we'd be able to line it with the evening.
I just want to add a little, I totally get where Charlene is coming from, and I feel very new and very green over here in the corner. And I have no idea what strategic planning was until we started talking about it as board and in committees. But as I've heard about it, and as I've talked to Mary Beth about it, I do feel like that is going to help us figure out how to grow as a unit. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm hearing you, and I'm like, yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. But I'm also, from what I've heard, I do feel like this is a good opportunity for us to grow as a unit. So I'm excited to find out how it goes and see where it brings us as a group. So I think it will be good. I understand that maybe sooner might be better, but I also think having an extra person who's an outside entity come in and help us figure out how to grow as a unit is going to be really helpful. So I totally agree with you, and I totally agree with you, and I totally agree with you. So I think it will be good. I do think it will be good. So that's my optimism coming out. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, and while the committees for the financing and strategic planning, that was developed a couple years ago to oversee, not to necessarily implement a strategic plan. That can only be done by the board and the district as a whole. So while we might discuss things, we do not have any authority in a committee to act as a board. We only have the authority to act as the committee. So it's great that people are coming and engaged, and that will only put us ahead for the conversation to know what's coming. So I think both need to happen simultaneously.
I was just going to add that that committee will be focusing on the budget for starting in September again, so we'll be busy with that too.
So, anything else? No. All right. So the next thing on the agenda that we have to decide exactly how we are going to proceed is we have the letter from the mayor nominating Peter Fagan. So per policy tonight, our action item is to receive the letter and interview the candidate. But Peter is not able to make it tonight. So, and then per policy, at the next scheduled board meeting, the board would then vote on that nomination. So I think the board maybe needs to decide, first of all, we have to, our action to receive the letter, and then we have to decide how we want to proceed. If we want to agree that if people have questions for him, we could discuss, ask him at the next meeting and still proceed with a vote.
I make a motion to receive the letter from the mayor, or the nomination from the mayor.
Okay. Is there a second?
I think we need to have a special meeting. I don't think we should be waiting until the end of August to appoint him. So I think there should be some sort of special meeting between sooner rather than later to get him appointed, because I don't think we should be down a board member for this many months.
just feel like, he should be present for an interview. I mean, I have questions, and I think other people may have, and the public may have. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to a special meeting being set for the interview, if that's what people want to do, but I do think that the interview process is important.
Let me call him and arrange that.
I guess I'm not too, none of us got interviewed. I mean, I guess we were all elected, so interviewing him, I don't know if, I guess it's the process, but.
In the past, pretty much it's just been, do they want to introduce themselves? Does anyone have any questions?
A full-on interview just isn't, none of us were interviewed, so I don't think that's an appropriate.
It's just part of the policy, so that the board would need to be in agreement in how we want to proceed.
And I think you said that we would still do that, but then we'd just maybe vote right after. Instead of doing those in two different meetings, we would just, because he's not available tonight, we would make that more efficient and just do it in August.
Is it possible to come up with a date between now and the end of June that he is available for a special meeting to do an interview? I know it's a lot, but I don't think we should be waiting until the end of August.
He's not available?
I don't think so.
Would this be an indicator of his availability serving in this role? I'm just kind of feeling.
Say that as a question, I guess, for when we.
I would think that we should be able to Skype or something. I mean, we have technology on our side. It just seems like, if he has agreed to this role, for us to have an opportunity to get to know him and have time to process it instead of waiting until August, it just seems like he has to be available before August. That's my tidbit on statistics.
Sorry. I don't, with this time off that we have, I'm not sure we're missing it that much. And, we'll be back, I'm assuming, in August.
And he can be invited to attend any committee meetings, so.
Does it normally take 4 months to get a board member reappointed if there's been a resignation?
So it is, Brittany resigned the day of our last meeting, so there goes a month. And then the policy is that the mayor has to have an appointment, and the board has to receive that appointment the next regularly scheduled meeting. And then the policy also says then the board votes on the following regular scheduled meeting.
That's the same requirements as the Board of Aldermen, and the appointments that come before the Board of Aldermen. I think part of it is that we're not having a July meeting, so that's why it's pushed out as well.
I just don't agree with 4 months, so.
Well, if he's appointed.
Anything till July, and then said, we're really only moving it a month. If we had a July meeting, we could vote on it then, but now we're just bumping it to August. The question is, are we comfortable with interviewing and voting on the same day versus?
Yes.
Because we have to vote on per policy at the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Well, I have a question to that. So if we do interview and vote, in the event we voted in favor of him, would he then not officially be on board, because then he would have to go through the process of being sworn in, or does that happen?
He could be sworn in once the board votes on him.
Okay.
Kevin?
He has pretty good credentials. He's been before. He's served in the state legislature. He's pretty well respected. I suspect that the interview process will not be really hours long.
So I
think we could do it all in the same meeting.
So I'll make a motion that we interview and vote in the August 30th meeting, and if we pass, then we swear him in that day as well.
Okay, I have a second? Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, so the only other thing that I had before we're going to need an executive session, so we added that on. We'll have a motion for that in a minute. But I just wanted to thank the administration and our staff and our students and our parents and everyone for the, year. It's been a, challenging year again, everyone getting back in and certainly everyone has done more than their part, and as mentioned before, the board, I wanted to thank the board for the engagement and the number of board members that are able to attend committee meetings and keep the discussion going. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for their work this year, their hard work, and also maybe mention lots of students are excited to be getting out, but some students may be struggling and the summer might be their hardest time. So those students to reach out to their teachers or their building principals or the parents so they can get things in line to have a great summer as well. So, thank you.
I just had one other thing under new business. I would like to explore forming a new committee called Staff Relations and change the existing committee to Staff Negotiation Committee. I feel that we are in need of a staff relations because I think it's appropriate for the board to have more than an adversarial relationship with the members of the schools, the staff, and so when I had come on, that's what I thought that committee was, based on the labeling of it, only to find that we don't have such a committee. And I think it would be beneficial for both the board and the teachers and other staff.
Can I? So that was, so that's part of why the focus of that committee is generally negotiations. In the last meeting that I had, that was a big part of the discussion and is changing kind of like the dynamics, part of the dynamics of that committee. So that's our meeting on June 21st. We're gonna talk more about that. So I definitely come, and Ted and I have talked with Rob, I've talked to a few other administrators about more engagement and whatnot. So that is something, it's kind of broadening the committee a little bit.
And we have to be very careful because we also have to sit as a quasi-judicial board.
Yes.
So while those relationships are important and should be made, maybe something that's more organic would be more appropriate. We certainly don't want our negotiations team sitting around with a group and hearing complaints. That puts the board at a disadvantage, and we could be liable for things that...
And that is something that we discussed as well as having guidelines for those meetings of sorts.
Certainly that would be something that would need legal review.
And I'd also want to, I'm a little cautious about just making sure we have some guidelines around that too, because I feel like we might be creating an avenue where people are skirting around maybe the process of where their issues need to be heard, maybe. So I want them to go to the proper channels and we're more of an oversight. So I just want to make sure that we're maybe staying in our lane. I understand what you're saying.
Building on some stuff that they tried years ago that just kind of fell to the wayside. That's really what it is.
I'm just seeing conflicting stuff everywhere. At one point, we're not supposed to talk to the teachers or any other people that we negotiate with. On the other hand, we can go to these events and we're encouraged to do that, but yet we're not encouraged to talk or to engage. And I perfectly understand we're not negotiating with them, we're not the grievance procedure, but I think that there is a whole lot that both sides could benefit from. And I've sat at meetings where this board would not even listen to school teachers and staff that were here, and I just think that's totally inappropriate. But I think there is a middle ground here where with some ground rules we can understand, so long as everyone follows them, that this is what this committee is to do and what the committee is formed for, or why they're broadening the scope, and just kind of develop some relationships. I'm not saying, friendships or marrying somebody, but I think there's a middle ground here.
So I think that the SBA has some things on engagement, and that they would be good for people to review and review the board's role in such. And certainly, it could be poor optics for a negotiating team to sit down and discuss what's bothering staff. As Charlene mentioned, there is avenues in place for information to come up to the board, and it could really put us in a tenuous situation if anything came back to the board on any of those concerns or conversations that the board didn't act on when they had a negotiating team sitting there over coffee discussing employees' disgruntled or elated avenues. And I might also caution that this might be something that we should wait for strategic planning for, because I believe in strategic planning, there's going to be an engagement piece, and more, certainly can come out of that, the roles, and...
It was talked about adding it into that piece as well.
So I think that's something that comes out.
I also just wanted to, identify that by attending some of the events and programs at the schools, that organically a relationship starts to happen where you're not sitting down and having an opportunity, like there's ways to point the conversation away from topics that wouldn't be appropriate for us to talk about, but just by going to events, it will organically grow a relationship with teachers.
I guess I don't understand what you're saying.
See, I think what you're saying is you're going there as yourself and you are a board member and you are seeing what is going on in the schools, but you are not there representing the board to ask them how things are going on.
Example, going to the Yes Plan thing tomorrow.
Developing relationships with teachers and staff, and developing a relationship.
Let me say, Karen, I think what you did initially when you came on, that, was it with Pam? Yeah, I think that's what we were talking about. I've been to RHS with Greg. Had COVID, didn't know it then, thank God we wear masks. Sorry, thanks. I had another, that celebration next week, right? We're acting as individuals. It's just making us, I think you set that tone when you went and did that, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go do some of that, and I think it's been really good. So, the tours I've done at Northeast and Stafford is crazy. I want to go there. I want to go to school there.
Next career.
And my next life, I will go to Stafford Technical Center.
Anything else? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
The water litigation.
Oh! And then I didn't add it. I skipped over it. I added it on the front and not on the back. Thank you, Rob. So, yes, C, should have been the Allen Street Campus groundwater remediation. So we have Abby and Glenn up. Good save.
Hi, thank you everybody for your flexibility in adding this to the agenda. As we met in the building committee last 2 weeks ago, we had a pre-bid walkthrough and vendors showed up. They had interest in bidding on the project. At that time, vendors had sort of stated that they had a pretty full schedule. They were not going to be able to get this project done. Bids were submitted. We reviewed the bids, knowing that they did not have, the availability or capability. We didn't rush to get it on this month's board agenda. This afternoon around 2 o'clock, I was speaking with the low bidder, reviewing the bid, and they indicated that they had a week free at sometime in the middle of August. So that's what kind of developed this change, and they are interested, and they are the low bidder, as you can see, by a significant amount. They meet the qualifications. They've been 35 years, state of Vermont licensed or approved vendor, done lots of work and excavation work across the state. So tonight we bring this letter to you. asking for approval to approve the bids that were submitted, $61,580 for Champlain Construction.
Entertain a motion?
I have a question.
We have a motion?
Oh.
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay, Stephanie.
Sorry.
Sorry about
Was this the, from the committee meeting, was this the one where you were gonna check, like, why the gap in them? And I feel like this gap looks different than the gap that we got at the building committee meeting. Was this that particular?
This was correct, yeah, so basically,
And you were gonna go back to the architect or somebody?
Otter Creek Engineering, and in review of this, basically, knowing that a contractor says, hey, I cannot do this year, I will do it in summer of 2023, they built in a large, almost like a huge increase to know that any subcontractor, so there's 4 subcontractors that are being required paving, there's some masonry, masonry, paving, concrete, and then their job will be to estimate and put in the groundwater piping. They were building in without really having solid numbers.
Okay.
That's our estimation. Again, these aren't quotes from the vendors, this is from the discussion that we spoke with.
So you're comfortable with the answer that you came up with in that regard? Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you both. All right. Save us, and get back on track. Executive session.
Make a motion for the board to convene to executive session for the purpose of discussing school security measures, the disclosure of which could jeopardize public safety. And to this executive session, we would like to invite Rob Bliss and Bill Olson.
Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?